So, a warm Payments as a Lifeline welcome to Dave Etling with InComm. We are so excited to be able to chat and explain a little bit about those of you who've been with PaaL for years on how we take financial technology and apply it to disaster and aid to make things simpler, faster, and more equitable. And Dave, thank you for your leadership for years with InComm and especially in health. So what we're seeing right now is with disaster and aid payments is where we were with healthcare back before there were health savings accounts. And I was part of that team that helped get the legislation through for HSAs. And I remember the biggest question was, how are we going to do this? Like, how are we going to get people, are they going to tape their receipts to a piece of paper and fax it in, which is exactly what happened for the first several years. And then financial technology got involved, and you've been leading that team and doing an incredible job, and it applies to disaster at this point too. So InComm was one of the earliest leaders, and now with disasters, if we flash forward 23 years to where we are now, and Dave, I thought we could talk about what you're doing and the financial technology that's supporting it for health, and then how we help to apply that to disaster, whether we get disaster savings accounts, and those are in, I think, 5 states and another 9 pending. Even whether we get those or not, the InComm financial technology is an incredible fit. So you want to talk a little bit about what you're leading, what you're doing, and then we can talk about disaster?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's highly germane, right? When we first got into the Medicare, Medicaid business, the problem statement was simple yet hard. The opportunity was Medicare Advantage members in particular were eligible for over-the-counter items, but there were a lot of nuances relative to what qualifies as an over-the-counter item. Simple things like mouthwash was approved, but not mouthwash with alcohol. Silly seeming things like you can get a cane for walking, but it needs to be a white cane, right? So we needed to be able to create SKU adjudicated technology that works immediately at point of sale. Because the challenge was you had senior citizens, their only access to order these over the counter items were to call a call center or ideally go to a website, provide some information relative to your member eligibility, and somebody would help you order your items or place the order for you. And then congratulations, it shows up in 2 weeks if you're lucky, right? So there was a real need to be able to put payments or a payment vehicle in a consumer's hand that was actually compliant and allowed them to shop on their own or a caregiver to shop on their behalf in a local store. So back in
Dave,
two, go
Dave, a
ahead.
quick thing, because we so often get folks that say, explain in terms that we understand. So SKU level adjudication for somebody who's not involved in fintech. Can you give us that quickly?
Oh, 100%. SKU level adjudication, maybe more simply stated, is every product that you purchase at a merchant has a barcode on it. It's scanned. That is considered a SKU or a UPC. There's other nomenclature like G10, depending upon what the makeup is. Certain retailers have their own logic for it, like Target has their own logic. But quite simply, it's the ability to inspect in real time what is in your market basket and apply the logic as to whether or not the funds on that card within that wallet can be approved for that item or not. So, yes to your Tylenol and Advil, your Alka-Seltzer's good, your beer or your wine not good, not covered. Your brown cane over your white cane, not good, but the white cane is good. Just to kind of riff off of an interesting example of what the world was faced with as it relates to solving for payments in that market. But that's SKU adjudication.
Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to make sure we didn't lose that.
Yeah, thank you. So that was the problem that we set out to solve, and we turns out have done very well. We work with 8 of the top 10 payers in the US, and probably 100 different health plans in differing ways, from everything from, hey, the consumer, the member earned a reward of $30 for getting a physical, and they can redeem that on anything in our network other than for alcohol, tobacco, firearms, gift cards, lottery tickets, prescription drugs. But if they want to get dog food with it, fine. They want to get a spatula or tongs, fine. If they want to get food, it's supposed to feel like a reward, so they want to make that broad, but they can't allow them to purchase the unsavory items with government funds, down to something as prescriptive as a smoking cessation program for a commercial audience. So you're a self-insured company, and you have smokers. Well, you could provide $100 a month, $50 a month on a card that can only be spent on those items in a network of about 77,000 locations today, which include everything from big box to pharmacies to local independent grocers to smaller pharmacies to even now convenience stores are starting to be interested in joining our network. So that was the problem, and we believe now, with the investment that we've made, along with our health plan partners, to create the need. Right, we had to build a network before we could get health plan partners on. Now we have more health plan partners, and the network continues to expand. Now that we've done that, we're able to see a lot more applications, such as disaster preparedness, disaster recovery, that we can use this network for, to be able to seamlessly distribute funds in a physical card format or a digital card format, and allow the consumer access to whatever the program sponsor says they're allowed access to. It could be buy anything but alcohol, tobacco, firearm type products. It could be as prescriptive as, we're a sponsor and we want to donate $1 million in water to this aid event. Our technology will allow that, and allow the flexibility for the consumer to be able to go into a large number of merchants and buy that water, or buy whatever items that they might need to prepare for a disaster, and to be able to get that into their hand in minutes or less of time, so that they can hurry up. I mean, it's a disaster's coming. They need to take heed, right? So we know time is of the essence. And then along with that, the burden of proof of what you've spent on is also very, very important, to be able to provide that back to the program sponsor. If you wanted to just do water, well, you want to know that it was just spent on water. And if you're putting the money in consumers' hands rather than sending big trucks full of water, it's really the only way that you would have to know that, right? Is to be able to see the evidence of where it was spent, what it was spent on, and how long do they have to spend it on, right? If the disaster is now, and the cleanup is 30 days, it doesn't need to be good for a year, right? And so you can make them time based as well.
So I love this. If I can tell a couple of stories, and then let's apply what you've just said. So in one case, it was the fires in LA, and the infrastructure around the fires was fine, right? The impacted area was not so fine. And there were two things going on. One was truckloads of stuff coming in from all over, which has a lot of cost, right? You got to pack it and ship it and deliver it, and have a place to deliver it, and have people come pick it up. With what your water example is what made me think of this. So what could have been done is, whomever has the money that wants to get the water out, is to have pushed to these accounts, go get water, and that would have not only gotten them water, but it would have fed those businesses that are right outside the blast zone. Because one of the complaints that came in was from those small businesses around the blast zone was, hey, we're still here,
Hmm.
and our neighbors aren't buying from us because they've got stuff coming in from outside. Can you explain how that might work in
Yeah, that's precisely correct. So as long as they're in the network, and we have I don't know, maybe 8 or 9,000 like independent merchants, including, out there, all of your Safeways and Albertsons and all the banners underneath that and Walmarts. So there's certainly convenience places, your pharmacies, which are on every corner, dollar stores, which are much more in the rural areas as and becoming really the shopping destination for a lot of consumers. We have a lot of convenient locations, and within our app, for example, which we can also make APIs extensible to third parties to be able to do that. If they were able to use some of our API technology that would be built in, um, a consumer could even see a map of where they could go shop right on their phone just by clicking a button. It'll show them everywhere in network. We also do a lot of advertising into the independent supermarket and pharmacy community because they're very important to have in a situation certainly where you could be shopping at this local store for the last 30 years, right? And these small businesses need to be cared and fed as well, right? So we do have a lot of independence in our network, not just the bigger guys. So ideally, those independents could also be in network as well.
I love that, and let's put a pin in that, and we'll talk about that offline. But we do a lot of work. Payments as a Lifeline does a lot of work with the SBA and with Operation Hope. And there's initiatives running that are to help refuel, rebuild small businesses. And to
Mhm.
have them as part of this not only helps the survivors, but it helps the small businesses. Okay, another story. So PaaL was speaking at an event that had mayors in it, and mayors who are from areas that are often impacted by, pick your disaster. And they'd never had a fintech speaker before, and they weren't quite sure what this person was doing on stage. But a few minutes in, one of the mayors who's impacted by hurricanes a lot stood up and he said, "All right, I've got questions. Let me paint a picture and you tell me if you can do this." And he said, "So I know who my people are. I've got voting records, I've got school records, whatever. I know who my constituents are." And we get hit a lot. "So could I work with one of your members and we create an account for each of these households? An account that will sit there waiting for something to happen. And then 4 days or 3 days before the hurricane's due to hit, could we put money into each of those accounts? And it's good for hardening their house, getting the baffled sandbags and the blue tarps and water. It's only good for that. And then you can reduce the impact of the disaster. Maybe not as many people have to evacuate." And he said, then the next thing is 2 days before, could we put money into the people's accounts? But it's only good outside the blast zone. So they can't spend the money until they're safe. Because one of his emergency managers said it costs $18,000 to rescue somebody off their roof.
Mhm.
If you just give them $1,800, they could go be safe. And so we're nodding. Yes, those are all possible. And he just keeps riffing on this, right? And then he says, "Okay, now it's time to come back. Could we load money into those same people's accounts? And now it's only good in the blast zone. We want them to come back and spend money in their community." And then his next question is, could we make it targeted at smaller businesses? And he was like so proud of himself that he came up with this. But all those things are possible. Do you want to extend on that a bit on how InComm and what you're doing could serve that mayor's
Yeah,
experience?
absolutely. Certainly the notion of being able to get a vehicle in a consumer's hand that could be denominated at a later point in time, totally possible. In fact, we have multiple wallets on our cards, physical or digital, it doesn't matter what the medium is there, where every wallet on the card can operate independent of one another. So there can be different themes. I mentioned OTC items, but we've also done healthy foods. I mentioned rewards and only ATF items, and those wallets can work collectively or independently, managing overlapping items, if you will, right? So being able to get the value out or the potential to have the value out in the consumer's hand already on their phone, totally doable with maybe messaging that says, hey, you've been identified to be in the disaster zone. Hold on to this, load it to your phone. We will let you know if we load money for a particular purpose, right? I'm just kind of ad-libbing there on what you might communicate out to the consumer. But absolutely, the restricting down to a geographic area becomes a bit more tricky when you're talking about doing that real time, right? You could theoretically say, okay, it's good at grocery stores, it's good at pharmacies, it's good at these what you would call a merchant category code, right? Or certainly anywhere in our network, which is going to overlap with a lot of those. I'm imagining this was either, Florida, Louisiana, or Texas. Say it's Florida, Public supermarkets in network, Winn-Dixie's in the network, and then all the other pharmacies and whatnot. Um, Restricting it to a geolocation, though, for spend, that becomes significantly more complex on the go. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that becomes more complex. You have things to think about, like, well, how easy do you want to make this, or how hard do you want to make it for the consumer? My recommendation would be, in a disaster kind of situation, there are other ways that you could recommend that they spend, or just tell them, hey, this is for in the disaster area. And maybe coupons could be issued in addition that go as a follow-up to that, to drive that behavior within the blast zone. Or you want to get them out, here's coupon discounts for Marriott hotels, Hilton hotels, things of that nature. I think you could encourage the behavior that you're looking for without locking it down that could create other confusion and other unintended consequences at the end of the day. I'm not saying it's a terrible idea at all. Just executing that, it comes with other kind of considerations that have to be thought through, where the idea is we want people to have money in their hand. We want them to be able to spend it. Yes, we want to be able to direct them to what we think makes sense for the community, but you don't want to make it terribly difficult for them, right? And everybody can have their own plan too, right? Maybe they need to get 250 miles outside of the disaster zone because they can get a hotel near family or something. There's a lot of reasons where you're going to create edge cases as to why that may not make sense in that moment for those folks.
You know, what you've just shared is one of the key reasons why PaaL always talks about pilot. Run pilots in blue sky days so you can capture some of the things that you just said to make
Mhm.
sure that it fits the way it's supposed to. There was one example early on in PaaL. We had a very large NGO that wanted to run a pilot, and they ran two. And one of them was leave it open, people can spend on whatever they want, where a Visa or MasterCard's accepted. The other one put the guardrails, no adult entertainment, no gaming, no firearms. And they saw, because it was a disaster simulation, that most of the people, even the ones that didn't have the guardrails, spent for that. But
Mhm.
we could see, not who didn't, but we could see the declines in the program. And so we went back to the big NGO and said, here's the two sets of data. And they decided going forward, they really liked the guardrails, just to make sure that
Yep.
something untoward didn't happen. So Dave, we've talked about the survivor and that this really helps the survivor. And that mayor was very excited because he said, when my constituents leave, everything crashes, right? We've got to get the small businesses and get them back. But let's talk a little bit about these disaster savings accounts, catastrophe savings accounts. So for those who've not heard of them, they're designed kind of like a health savings account where you or your employer can put money in. But they're also designed for low and moderate income, where a nonprofit could put money in or the government could put money in. So especially for those last two buckets of funding, they are responsible to report back to the voters or to the donors how the money was was spent. And the technology, Dave, that you've been talking about makes it so simple. So you've got not just the survivor, but everybody in the value chain um, is benefiting, except the fraudsters. They really lose out on what we're doing here. But you want to add anything to that whole idea?
Yeah, and that's frankly the way the technology was built, right? Is to be able to add funds that can be discreetly managed based upon whatever your objective is or whatever the compliance protocol is. So you can load funds in an infinite number of wallets on our products, all of which each wallet can be managed independently of one another. So let's say there was a donor that wanted to donate a certain amount of funds for a certain purpose. Very easy to accommodate that. The water example is a good one. They want to load a wallet on a card for $50 a family exclusively for water. They can get that. Plus, they're going to get reporting that's going to show what how much water did they get. And if they don't spend it, again, time-based, those funds can be returned to them, and they can still say, I donated $1 million in water to this program at the end of the day, and hopefully they're reinvesting that, if you will, into the community. If it is unspent, that creates the opportunity to do that without the fraud, waste, and abuse components that everyone's so concerned about.
You just said something that we hear as a huge sigh of relief with a lot of the funders, the foundations or corporates or nonprofits. What they had been using in the past, they go and buy a gift card just off a rack at Walgreens or whatever, which has no data. They have no idea how it's being spent, so they can't plan for the next disaster, right? To be able to see how people are spending, and they don't know if the money was spent. So what you just shared, Dave, is huge, and they've been really excited in that if those funds aren't spent for that disaster, they can go back to the funder and they can invest it in a future one. And they've got the transparency has been huge, especially when we're talking to the federal government or to states, that now they have visibility to how their funds are being spent versus
Mhm.
all the things that get into the news of, hey, $100 million got raised, where to go?
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, I mean, InComm is a gift card selling business, right? And so not selling against gift cards.
Yeah.
But from a practical perspective, if people are going out and buying cards at merchants, there are other, things that might make that experience way more difficult than you might think. There are laws, regulations around how many gift cards can you actually buy, right? And so now you might have to be providing burden of proof to the store manager. Hey, this is for a cause, it's for a business. Because technically, they're not supposed to sell any individual more than $2,000 in gift cards in a single day, right? And so consequently, you could end up having to go from store to store to store. You're kind of breaking the law actually when you're doing that, even though it's for the purpose of getting disaster funds in hands. Just like like many laws, right? There can be unintended consequences that create friction in the process. So this certainly makes it a whole lot easier than sending people out to buy gift cards in some way, shape, or fashion to then distribute them.
Exactly. Another story that came up, and this was again the LA fires, and it was one of the new colleagues with PaaL IRUSA, and there was a whole room, maybe 30 different funders in the room, and the survivors, a couple thousand, came through and they signed up at each booth and filled out all the paperwork, right? And then they said, oh, a week or two, you'll get funds. And the survivors said, what am I supposed to do tonight? I got to get food, I got to house my kids. And our one partner was dispersing on a phone and put that money in. And one of the moms was in tears because she could now go buy the prescription for her kid. And then more money came in like 3 weeks later, and they were able to push that money again to those same people. So the gift cards are great for a purpose, but if you're really trying to help people over time, this has just been what you do has been amazing to facilitate. Long-term recovery can be 7 years.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us didn't realize that until we got involved in disaster.
Yeah. That's an awfully long time. That's a credit report.
Indeed, indeed. So, Deb, I want to be respectful of your time because I know you're super busy. Some of the takeaways here, um, we've talked about the data and being able to have guardrails so that if the funder doesn't want adult entertainment or gaming, we can do that. We can give them back the data all the way down to the SKU level or item level, a blue
Mhm.
tarp versus, I don't know, bottle wine.
Correct.
And then one of the things I really love that you said was 77,000 merchants in the network, and 8 to 9 of them are independent. 8 to 9,000 are independent grocers and pharmacies, which fits right in to these initiatives that PAL is doing with SBA and Hope Village. That to fuel those small businesses is amazing. Any closing comments?
Well, certainly, I provided the Highmark link on LinkedIn that Neb posted. I think that's a great example of how our technology's been used for good, in helping to solve food insecurity. So I'd recommend people just have a look at that. Also, just in the future, and other things that we can be doing, right? And I know there is no seemingly one size fits all for disaster preparedness or certainly recovery, right? There are other applications that we have or things that we could be doing over time that round out that, I think, overall offering, or more offerings for consumers to get money in their hands. One great example is our what we call our Vanilla Pay network, that is a cash in and cash out, similar to the being able to distribute a digital barcode with a that is SKU restricted with value on it. We could enable people to get a barcode. They go into a participating merchant. It might be 65 to 70,000 locations in the US that are a part of the Vanilla Pay network. And they could scan that barcode and get cash right there, right? And so they're not, they can go to a convenient place, whether it has an ATM or not, and get it. Or God forbid, having to hand out cash and try and manage that. That also can be limited to the only thing you can get with that cash out would be a gift card, right? You could load it onto an open loop gift card instead of just cash. And you could even have some level of restrictions, if you wanted to, on that. Or it could just be, hey, we just need to get cash in their hands or value in their hands, but we don't want them taking it out of the ATM. They could do it on an open loop gift card as well. So that's also an opportunity for a little bit different use case where it's just, hey, we need to get money in people's hands. We just don't want them withdrawing from an ATM. You could have some options there. Another thing that could be very interesting is technology that would be able to identify using a card that you've registered that's already in your wallet, right? A card that you've registered when you go spend $200, let's just say, at the Home Depot, and that was an eligible thing. The ability to intercept that transaction and put money back onto your card for the thing that you're working with to send space, where they built that technology out. The magic really is being able to intercept the card numbers to determine whether or not they're eligible.
Okay.
The consumer does have to go register their card number so that it can be checked, and then you match it up. Then it gets matched up against the merchant category or the merchant ID even. There's some pretty slick use cases there for that I could
Yeah.
also see eliminating the need to distribute anything. Then it kind of becomes more just communication to that consumer. Go register your card number, go shop at these locations. You have up to $200 that you can spend, be capped at that. Side is that example where you're like, Well, we don't have $200, right? If you didn't have $200 to spend, that wouldn't necessarily, because it's spend and kind of refund transaction if possible.
Cool. A lot of talk being able to help families to be more ready and their buildings and their small businesses to be more ready, to reduce the impact, during, get people out and get them safe, and then for the up to 7 years of recovery. You know,
Hmm.
funder could say, we're going to give these families 2,000 a month for the next 4 years for housing.
Yeah.
It's such a cool toolkit I so appreciate you being part of the evangelizing that we do with PAL out to government and private sector.
And certainly with that last example there, I mean, the 7 years of recovery, and you think about kind of the small businesses, right? If you could get the merchant IDs that represent their credit card terminal in there, you can effectuate exactly what you just said with that technology, where they can get value, but it's paid back value immediately if they spend at this merchant or that merchant or that merchant, but not everywhere else. So that's something maybe to think about, especially if we're talking about a 7 year period where we'd have a little bit of time to plan around what that program actually looks like and how you want to drive that communication and spend.
All right. We're going to put a pin in that one too. So let's go back with you. So for everybody who's been watching, thank you. This is Dave Etling, InComm, a key member of Payments as a Lifeline. And thank you.
Thank you.